Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar, Digital Credentials, a Beginner's Guide. My name's Cody, I'm from Accredible, and I'll be your host for today. If you're not familiar with Accredible, we are the world's leading digital certificate and digital badging software. So over 1,700 organizations like Google, Slack, Sage, S&P Global, Skillsoft, and quite a few more trust us to issue their digital badges and certificates, and we issue millions of credentials each month. So your physical certificates could be costing you more than you realize, and here's why. We now live in a digital one-click world. We've come to expect instant results from search engines and always-on connectivity through social media platforms. But for certifications, the vast majority of career advancing credentials are still issued on paper. And that means that candidates are often waiting days or weeks for credentials to arrive in the mail, which could prevent them from celebrating the achievement in the moment. And employers and recruiting managers want to verify skills immediately without having to pay extra for transcripts or wait for issuing bodies to respond to them or spend time tracking down the right department. But it isn't only about instant gratification. Our developing world is creating powerful shifts that are changing how learners use programs, how members see their affiliations, and what you'll need to do to remain competitive in the market changes too. All that to say, it's now time to bring your valuable credentials into the modern era and to embrace digital transformation. So in this webinar, we will provide a beginner-friendly introduction to digital credentials, what they are, how they're used, and why your organization should consider digital credentials to benefit both you, your staff, and your recipients. Let's jump in. And we'll begin with the basics. Digital credentials is the sort of umbrella term given to digital badges and digital certificates. They are the solution for paper-based certificates like diplomas, degrees, certifications, membership badges, and awards in an online world. And digital credentials are, by definition, simple to award, manage, and verify. Some organizations choose to, let's say, only issue a digital badge or only a digital certificate, but many of the organizations we work with choose to issue both in the way of a sort of more formalized digital certificate and an easy to embed digital badge. So diving in then, what's a digital badge? Digital badges are visual awards that use colors, shapes, and symbols in their design and are hosted on a dedicated credential page. And when done correctly, they are created based on the Open Badge standard, which ensures that the image itself is embedded with the necessary metadata for the award, and it can be verified if the recipient chooses to, let's say, download the digital badge image. Digital badges differ from the, let's say, pictorial badges that you might see issued through an app like Audible. The digital badge and digital badge page provide not just an image, but also contextual metadata, including skills tags, evidence of demonstrable skills, and the details of the program. Digital certificates then are more formal in their presentation, and they appear like a traditional paper certificate in layout with a recipient name, the issuing body, the certificate name, and the number. They often include an issue date and maybe even a stakeholder signature from the issuing organization. Digital certificates are hosted on a dedicated credential page with space to include program information, evidence of results or demonstrable skills, and one-click verification. You as the organization can also enable recipients to print certificates from home or professionally, and of course include a scannable QR code in your design ready for printing that would lead back to that dedicated credential page. All right, now we know at a high level what they are. Let's take a look at how digital credentials are used. Digital badges are versatile. They can be used to represent any type of career advancing credential, but are most commonly used to represent credentials that, let's say, may take a short time to learn. So for example, an individual module completion or attending an event or a conference. Digital badges used for, let's say, module completion are also often referred to as micro credentials when they're used as standalone awards or stackable credentials that culminate in the recipient earning a final badge or a digital certificate that's then going to represent the full program. And then the digital certificates are generally used for credentials that take a longer time to learn, such as a degree, a diploma, or certification. And the dedicated credential page for the digital certificates provides room for additional pertinent information and documentation. And that includes work samples, references, transcripts, and exam results. Digital certificates are also used to represent official documentation. So, for example, professional associations use digital certificates to represent association membership and to reward completion of exclusive member programs or continued education. So then we get to the question, why do we need digital credentials? And the simple answer is because the world's evolving, right? I mentioned at the start of this webinar, we live in a one-click world, which means everyone expects instant, always available access, and many aspects of our lives have already been digitized in that way. So for instance, job applications and background checks. But for the way in which we represent valuable career advancing credentials, we're still stuck in the paper age. And that means that organizations that issue paper credentials are missing out on some of the core benefits there, such as acting as an additional marketing channel. They suffer from a lack of fraud protection. They have no validity control, and they lack the ability to offset costs and drive revenue with their credential programs. And diving in there, cost isn't just the actual dollar spend, but the value of what's at risk if something goes wrong. In regards to certification, that's the potential for fraud and the harm that can occur to an organization's reputation if a credential certificate badge would be spoofed, edited without authorization, or fraudulently claimed by an individual that doesn't have the knowledge or experience. And certification fraud happens both inside and outside of educational environments, but it always carries a potential for risk. And the barrier to fraud with a physical certificate is really as low as having a document scanner and maybe some knowledge of Photoshop. Now, think about what would happen if a doctor or a nurse falsified their credentials, managed to get into a job that directly impacts human lives on a daily basis, right? The kicker there is that already happened in several places around the world. There's one instance in the UK where a fraudulent psychiatrist served for 23 years before they were caught in 2018, which was 2 years after they'd been arrested for manipulating an elderly patient into changing their will. And more recently, in April of 2021, South Carolina's largest urgent care provider agreed to pay a $22.5 million settlement to settle whistleblower claims after an investigation revealed their urgent care providers were not only incorrectly credentialed, but they were actually ineligible for the credentials required to provide the specific care that they had. Credential fraud isn't often top of mind, but it's an issue that could be extremely expensive and one that you should care about. In comparison, digital credentials are secured against unauthorized edits and spoofing with bank level encryption. So that means digital credentials are as difficult to hack as a national level bank. And I should mention, I am framing that idea of security around Accredible's technology. I can't guarantee the security of any other vendor. Using digital credentials and that national level security, those examples of real life credential fraud mentioned in the last slide are sort of eliminated. You as the issuer don't have to worry about the cost of harm to your reputation or the potential for a multi-million-dollar lawsuit or a settlement. The ability to write digital credentials to the blockchain as well provides an additional level of protection. Of course, the blockchain is virtually impossible to hack, and recorded digital credentials there can be quickly and easily verified against the existing record to guarantee that there's been no edit and no unauthorized change made. So then what about control over things like validity and expiration? So using a physical credential, once a certificate is in the hands of a recipient, that's it. Control is lost. I have my diploma. And a recipient can spoof an expiration date or an issue date to, let's say, present you from renewing that, or to show off that they have an in-date credential. Maybe they remove the expiration date altogether. For membership credentials, if the recipient does something that, say, poorly reflects on the organization, and we need to have that credential revoked, that becomes even harder, as you now have to trust that that individual is going to return or destroy a physical credential without making copies, or simply saying that they've done so. There's an interesting example of this from the UK, where gas engineers needed to be registered with the Safe Gas Registry to carry out gas safety checks in domestic and commercial properties. But there were many examples of engineers that spoofed old membership credentials. They falsely claimed they were still registered, and then they carried out unsafe work. So not only is that extremely dangerous for any property owner, but it led to huge fines and suspensions, even prison sentences. Digital credentials, that control is retained by you, the issuer. And Accredible specifically has automated processes to manage the credential for you. So you can set expiration dates with email reminders that are going to encourage recipients to keep their skills up to date. Or you could, for instance, decide to revoke a credential at any time. And then once it's expired, the digital credential is going to get updated with a red banner to make sure that nobody knows that, or nobody can be persuaded that the credential is still valid. It can't be verified anymore. That specifically as well is going to provide further incentive for recipients to recertify and reskill, and it helps generate additional revenue for you as the issuer through that. The automated expiration status and notifications, we've noticed, generally drastically reduce the time required for credential management. All right, now let's talk about restricted shareability of physical certificates. Physical certificates provide essentially no visibility to the organization regarding if and where they're being shared with friends, family, and peers of the recipient. More often than not, certificates are received and filed away with, some other personal paperwork. Maybe they get hung up on an office wall. I know my diploma is sitting in a box because I haven't put it up on the walls yet. The recipient might snap a picture of themselves holding a certificate and maybe share that image to a social feed, but even that gets buried over time. When the next steps to sharing are complex or more involved than a couple of clicks, it's less likely that your recipients are going to take action. And even when they do, there's no easy way to track how and when recipients are sharing your certificates without creating additional labor for your staff. In comparison, digital credentials eliminate the complexity of sharing. Recipients can share digital credentials to social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter and again, this is in reference to Accredible's technology specifically, from the credential page in a single click. And you as the issuer can add a clear call to action button in the credential delivery emails with a target social media platform, maybe that aligns to your organization's marketing strategy. Recipients also have the option to embed their credentials in an email signature or on a personal website. And aside from instant exposure to the target audience, increased digital credential visibility helps to drive revenue through referral clicks and boosting the number of signups to your courses. So you as the organization can offset the spend that would traditionally be committed to avenues such as paid media or social ads. Time is then freed up as staff don't have to rely on building multiple target audiences and platforms, or constantly updating and adjusting paid media strategies. Instead, the recipients automatically share credentials with their network. And that is mostly your target network. And that provides the benefit of a copycat effect from peers that see recipient success and they want to achieve similar stuff for themselves. All of this recipient engagement is easily trackable within our platform, at least through detailed analytics that allow you to identify how many recipients have opened, engaged with, or shared credentials, how many referral views or clicks have been generated, what platforms have been shared to, and even which of your recipients are your major influencers, who's driving the majority of those clicks and views. All right, labor time is increased where automation isn't possible or available. So for physical credentials, after recipients meet a target criteria, staff still need to spend time downloading the list of recipient details to create the certificates to send out. And that creates a delay between recipients passing the module, completing a certification, or signing up for membership, and then actually receiving their achievement or their credentials. And not only does that delay reflect poorly on professionalism, for recipients, the moment for celebration can feel like it's already passed, and they're less likely to share their achievement. Some platforms do offer limited automation with a PDF style certificate that are sent, after a recipient achieves a goal criteria, but PDFs are essentially the same as physical credentials in that they lack security, they can be easily spoofed, they can't be tracked, and they create barriers to sharing. And for the mention of integration here or automation, I'll pull a question from the Q&A. Barb asks, does your product integrate with learning management systems? So that's one of the pieces that I think matters to us here, is that Accredible does have a native integration with Canvas, Moodle, Thinkific, and a ton of other platforms that allow you to set goals inside of your LMS and then automatically have Accredible take care of the issuance on the other side. All right, so our comparison, digital credentials are automatically sent and received instantly through email once the candidate reaches that goal criteria that we set. And that, of course, encourages the recipients to celebrate in the moment by sharing their credential to social media, and it drastically reduces the time spent producing and sending credentials. But I don't want you to just take my word for that. So I've brought in here a case study of a success story with digital credentials from one of our credentialing partners. So the Digital Marketing Institute were issuing pretty high value paper diplomas to learners all around the world. And the cost of sending certificates internationally was expensive, but they also weren't guaranteed to arrive, which created an additional spend as certificates would sometimes need to be resent due to required edits or damage in transit. And with over 15,000 certificates issued in a batch at about $9.32 per certificate, excluding the cost of labor, their costs were surpassing $140,000 per batch. It was also inefficient in terms of labor time, as it was taking staff at least one full day of work to issue and manage the certifications each month. The monthly workload of sending certificates was around 8 hours, and once the recipients had received credentials, DMI had no way to track who was viewing them, what the recipient was doing with the certificate, and if the certificate was actually generating any further interest in their programs. And as a result, they decided to make the switch to digital credentials. And then after making the switch, DMI was able to cut down staff time by about 94%, from 8 hours a month to half an hour a month for creating, maintaining, and managing their certificates. And so Accredible, of course, helped DMI to create an advanced certification process that maximized speed and efficiency while keeping costs low. We've saved them, and this number is now out of date, but we saved them initially over $50,000 each year in certificate spend. DMI was also able to utilize Accredible's digital credentials as a marketing tool, which I think is really neat. It exponentially raised their brand awareness online. So recipients were keen to add and share their certificates to social media profiles, with thousands adding credentials to LinkedIn profiles. It generated an additional 190,000 certificate views across their certificates. So as a result of that, not only did they save time and spend, but digital credentials have actually become a key marketing avenue for the Digital Marketing Institute. The recipients, of course, are also benefiting from being able to showcase their achievements in digital marketing, which improves both employability and promotion prospects. So, to summarize, digital credentials are the modern evolution of traditional credentials. They benefit organizations by helping you to reduce the time spent and labor for issuing and managing credentials with automated issuance and integration into existing systems, provide increased protection for brand reputation and against fraudulently claimed or spoofed credentials. And they offer full control over expiration and validity to help drive revenue through continued learning and renewals. Now I'll open things up to questions. The first one I have here is from Paul. This was a follow-up to the integration question that Barb asked. Paul asks, does your technology integrate with Docebo LMS? The answer is yes. That integration launched, I believe, a couple of months ago, actually. So we have everything set up for that. I don't know the terminology specifically, Paul, but I think it's a recipe that Docebo calls it when they have their automation pieces. So if I'm not mistaken, Accredible has the integration itself, and it also has recipes for issuing credentials, adding people to groups in Accredible, et cetera, that you can put into the existing flows, logical workflows that you have in Docebo. So you can actually trigger and automate that way. But I am not an expert. I know surface level, I think. So if you don't mind, I'll try and put you in touch with somebody that can talk a little bit more technically about that. The next question that we have here is from an anonymous attendee. It says, can badges and certificates be stacked up to 3 levels? The answer to that is essentially yes. There's a piece of Credible that we didn't actually go through here, which is collections. So you can actually set things up to be sort of progression pathways through what you're issuing. And outside of that, I mean, you can architect your own learning pathways in any way you choose. So whether or how you want to stack that is really up to you. We try to make it so that you can create your credentials in ways that are going to make it very easy for somebody to realize what step and level somebody's at just by looking at a glance. All right, next question I have here is from Carla. It asks, does Accredible integrate with MailChimp for communicating with candidates? Accredible has a proprietary email piece in it that sends that stuff off. I'm fairly certain, and I'll double check with this for you and get somebody to reach back out to you, but I'm fairly certain we can probably use Zapier or our API to send that information to MailChimp instead. We usually have our customers try to use the Accredible emails themselves, though. It's going to give you pretty much the same things that you get through MailChimp. It's just going to fire off the credential to them, have links to access the badges. Those links, of course, are also single sign-on enabled, so they're automatically pre-authenticated when they receive the email and go to the credential. But I believe what you're asking for is possible. There's another anonymous attendee here who asks if there's a control prior to the issuance of a badge or certificate when integrated in Canvas. Essentially, whether somebody can manually verify that a learner has indeed earned a credential prior to the issuance. Yes, you can set it up that way. Obviously, if you want a manual review period, you can engineer that into what you're trying to do and how you're trying to make it work. It is, I would say, adding additional work for you that may not be necessary, but it is entirely up to you. If you want to do that, you have the ability to create those manual double checks. This brings to mind a conversation that our senior leadership had with a testing provider called Cavion, where we talked about in pretty good detail the sort of juxtaposition of instant gratification in testing and the receipt of a secure credential that somebody controls. I think the outcome of that discussion was that the level of control that a digital credential provides to allow you to pull back the credential itself, to say that something is no longer verified is really important for that instant gratification discussion. So that, for instance, I know you talked about, whether or not the learner has actually earned the credential. I don't know exactly what your testing style is for that, but let's say somebody cheats on a test and you find that out afterwards. You have the ability still to pull back the credential. So you can, in effect, do your review as recipients are getting their credentials and then reach back out to them afterwards saying, we have revoked your credential for XYZ, or you still need to take XYZ steps. And then, of course, they have, I think, added incentive to go back and finish up, wrap up whatever they were trying to do that they still need to achieve for you. All right, the next question that I have here is from Susanna, and it is, how much would it cost for issuing digital badges to participants inside of a MOOC, a massive online course provider? The cost per recipient is going to differ based on what you go for a plan. I mean, realistically, you're not going to be on the same pricing as, let's say, Google Cloud Certified, who are issuing tens of thousands of credentials on a daily basis. Or you could be, a smaller organization, maybe on a sort of self-service plan where you issue a certain number of credentials per year. Based on how many credentials you want to issue, or I should say, how many unique recipients you want to issue to in a given time period, we can help you figure out what that cost is going to be. I do need to clarify, we don't charge by number of certificates, we charge by the unique recipients you hit in a year. So if I, as your recipient, earned 3 credentials from you over the course of 6 months, I've taken up 1 credit, not 3 credits. So it's based on unique recipients, not the number of credentials you issue, which is a pretty powerful tool if you're trying to engage a lot of your customers. All right, there's one other question here about credential adoption. Basically asking, do audiences really adopt credentials? And I apologize for paraphrasing. The answer is yes, overwhelmingly. Every one of our customers that has done any sort of research or polling to their own customer base has found an overwhelmingly positive response to digital credentials. And a lot of them see it, a lot of the end users see it as a necessity moving forwards for digital credentials to exist as part of a reward for a program. So we see very, very strong things in support of that. The other side of adoption can be who is adopting things. I know there's kind of a tendency still in tech, as short-sighted as it is, to see older audiences as less receptive to new technologies. And I think the CFP board, the Certified Financial Planner Board, is a great example. So as you might imagine, a large portion of their professionals fall into that category that I just described. And they were initially somewhat worried about adoption because of that audience. And they succeeded wildly in getting people to adopt credentials, in getting them to share and showcase and use the credentials to their benefit. I mean, people absolutely love the fact that they have them. They were successful because they, in addition to enabling their audience with credentials, made sure to help educate their audience through their normal communication channels about the benefits, about the usefulness. So if that is the issue with adoption, then I would say education is key. And that's also something that we can help you with. All right. The next question I have here is from Carla, and it is whether or not we have an app where candidates can show credentials to instructors for future courses. I'm going to try and answer this one correctly, but if I get it wrong, please feel free to correct me here. There is, if somebody wants to showcase credentials to an instructor or anybody else, there is a credential wallet that recipients would receive that would contain all of the credentials they've issued, or sorry, all of the credentials that they've received. So if I've gotten a credential in Google Ads Mastery or one from DMI about marketing strategy, all of those would be collected in that one wallet, and I can show that at any point in time. If it's showing credentials to somebody to show that they've completed a prerequisite, let's say, that can also be done either from the Credential Wallet or sharing a link to the credential itself. Some issuers choose to have credentials be private for privacy reasons, but most credentials are going to be freely shareable so that somebody could send their credential, their proof, to an instructor in that situation to show that they should be able to take that upcoming course. All right, I have to say thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. If you would like to learn more about the benefits of digital credentials, I would say join me in future webinars, or you can head over to our website right now at accredible.com, and from there download some of our existing resources. Remember, you can also get in touch with an expert at pretty much any time from our website, or you can sign up for a trial account of the software. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.